Welcome back, riders. Today I'm going to be ranking every single roller coaster across all six Disney parks in America. I'm excited to put out this list because I have a history of going to Disney parks, and recently I've been going even more frequently. Growing up, I visited Disney World roughly every 3 to 4 years. Now, with my adult money, I purchased a season pass for Disney World in August 2023, and I've already visited Florida 3 times since purchasing that pass. Add in 2 visits to Disney's California Adventure in 2014 and 2021, plus two 16-hour days at both the California parks in March of 2023 and a couple weeks ago in March 2024. And you can say I'm familiar with all the coasters at all the parks in the country. Plus, I have been to all the parks a good amount in the last year, so I think there's no better time than the present to put out this list. Now, I will say I am a roller coaster enthusiast before I am a Disney enthusiast. I will be ranking these coasters with that mentality in mind. Don't get me wrong, I love theming and whatnot, but don't be mad when I have negative tidbits about like certified classic Disney coasters. Also, due to the nature of some of these rides, this video will have spoilers, so just a warning. With that, let's jump into the list, starting with my least favorite coaster and working my way up to the best. Coming in last is the Barnstormer at the Magic Kingdom. This is a Vekoma Junior coaster that opened in 1996. It has a height of 30 feet, a top speed of 25 miles per hour, and a length of 794 feet. Now, I do have a confession with this coaster. This is the only roller coaster on the list that I have not been on within the past year. In fact, it's been over 10 years since I've been on it. I rode it so long ago. The last time I rode it, it was known as the Barnstormer at Goofy's Wiseacre Farm. But this coaster actually has clones that can be found just about everywhere, and I've been on these various clones recently, so I'm fairly confident that I still get the gist of the Barnstormer despite not riding it in any recent time. I did watch a POV and some off-ride footage to see what the theming looks like these days, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with this coaster. Its last place ranking is pretty much just based on the fact that this is the smallest coaster on any Disney property in the States. For kids, this is a great introductory coaster. I know that firsthand because when I last rode this, it was an introductory coaster for me. But, there's only so much you could do with a height of 30 feet. It's a good coaster for what it is, but it just can't compete with the bigger coasters with bigger budgets. For what it's worth, for this model and clone, it is one of the best ones out there because of the theming. Coming in 17th is Chippendale's Gadget Coaster at Disneyland Park. This is another Vekoma Junior coaster, this one opening in 1993. It has slightly lower stats with a height of 27.9 feet, top speed of 21.7 miles per hour, and a length of 679.1 feet. Although Gadget Coaster has slightly different stats than Barnstormer, they have the same layout and ride exactly the same aside from being mirrored. You don't feel the extra height or speed on Barnstormer. Pretty much everything I said about Barnstormer applies to Gadget Coaster. Now, I do have Gadget Coaster ranked above Barnstormer. Honestly, if we're being real, that is probably because of recency bias, but Gadget Coaster actually received some refreshed theming when it reopened in 2023 to coincide with the renovations of Toontown. When I rode Gadget Coaster, it was only a week or two after it reopened, and I was pretty impressed with the theming. Thus, I give Gadget Coaster the edge over Barnstormer. Next on the list is Goofy Sky School at Disney's California Adventure. This is a common Mock Rides Wild Mouse that opened in 2001. While technically a custom layout, it's really a clone with minor modifications that make the ride actually a little worse than the normal Mock Rides Wild Mice out there. These can be found literally everywhere, and honestly, a coaster like this has no business being at a Disney park. It has low capacity, it's hard to theme and sell as a complete experience, and it can be found literally everywhere, so it's not unique to Disney in the slightest. And Disney took the Mock Rides Wild Mouse clone and made it worse. This installation is trimmed to death, and some of the zippier drops that the clones have were removed on this installation. Granted, it's not that much worse, but overall this is one of my least favorite Mock Rides Wild Mice out there. This coaster still has a decent dose of laterals, and despite its tackiness for a Disney park, the theming is still above average when compared to all the other clones out there. Moving on to the more unique coasters, next is Slinky Dog Dash at Disney's Hollywood Studios. This is a family launch coaster built by Mock Rides that opened in 2018. Any official stats are a little up in the air, but according to Wikipedia, it has a height of 50 feet and a top speed of 40 miles per hour, so take that as you will. It's in the right ballpark, though. The ride features two launches, one of them being a rolling launch. This roller coaster is much more like a complete package compared to the prior entries on the list. However, Slinky Dog Dash offers next to nothing for thrill seekers like myself. That is completely understandable. After all, it's a family coaster at a Disney park. But in my opinion, the rest of the family coasters later in this video have redeeming factors that I enjoy. Slinky Dog Dash doesn't. I will say I like the layout on paper, but in execution, you're just going way too slow to get virtually any kind of force at all. Its top speed is listed at 40 miles per hour, but it never feels like it's over 20. It has countless airtime hills that give no airtime. The launches have absolutely no bite. I think I can achieve a better acceleration myself if I just started running. But again, this is a family coaster, so I understand why it has no forces. At the same time, though, like I mentioned, there's just nothing that stands out enough on this coaster to get me in a mood to ride it, especially with the wait time Slinky Dog Dash pulls. The theming is just okay in my opinion. I will give it some credit. Night rides are pretty cool with the lighting package it has. Plus, it's a long ride. Coming in 14th is actually a roller coaster, excuse me, technically a pair of roller coasters that no longer exist. I'm talking about Primeval Whirl at Disney's Animal Kingdom. It opened in 2002 and closed when the pandemic shut down the parks, as it never reopened when the parks did. Built by Reverchon, Primeval Whirl was a spinning wild mouse that stood 42.7 feet tall, had a top speed of 29.1 miles per hour, and a track length of 1,337.9 feet. Primeval Whirl was actually two separate but identical roller coasters. There were two to effectively like double the ride capacity as a standalone installation would have been too low in capacity for Disney. I debated including Primeval Whirl on the list or not because it no longer exists. In actuality, though, Primeval Whirl is the only roller coaster across both Disney properties in America to ever be removed. And since I rode it, I decided to include it. Well, I actually only rode one side. Like Barnstormer, I last rode Primeval Whirl essentially half of my lifetime ago. But also like Barnstormer, there are numerous clones of Primeval Whirl that exist across the country that I've ridden very recently, and I actually have quite a history with the Reverchon spinning wild mouse, as there was one that existed at my home park of Six Flags Great America called Ragin' Cajun, and it was my favorite ride growing up. So I'm very familiar with this ride. Primeval Whirl also had the added bonus of some theming, granted not much, but definitely more than any clone that comes to mind. Spinning wild mice in general can be a little temperamental. The amount you spin varies on a couple factors, the biggest one being weight distribution. Some rides are a little tame and lackluster, but then you have some rides where you're just spinning out of control for an awesome ride. Primeval Whirl had a low floor but a high ceiling, and that high ceiling is the reason I give it the spot over Slinky Dog Dash. Sure, I would consider some of my rides on Reverchon Spinning Wild Mice worse than Slinky Dog Dash, but there are some rides where I am laughing uncontrollably and come off the ride with my whole balance out of whack, in a good way. Slinky Dog Dash does not come close to producing any kind of similar feeling. Alright, now we're moving on to the certified classics you think of when you think of Disney. Number 13 is one side of the Matterhorn bobsleds, the Fantasyland side, or the right side, at Disneyland Park. Built by Aerodynamics, it opened in 1959 as the world's first tubular steel tracked roller coaster. The Fantasyland side has a height of 80 feet and a length of 2,134 feet. This is a weird roller coaster. You wind down and through a huge mountain facade in a manner that is not the most graceful. This ride is a bit jerky. I can personally handle it, and I do enjoy the ride. But at the very least, it is a little awkward. At worst, well, there's countless people that just refuse to ride it. You see people talking or joking all the time about how riding the Matterhorn is like a chiropractor appointment. There are definitely some fun turns though. You pass through a couple of set pieces and you encounter the snowman a couple times. The ending through the water is also something that is unique and cool. The Matterhorn is not the craziest ride aside from the jerky nature of the ride, but I do enjoy it, and it's historic. Naturally, the next roller coaster is the other side of the Matterhorn bobsleds, the Tomorrowland side, or the left side. Just like the Fantasyland side, the Tomorrowland side opened in 1959 and was built by Aerodynamics. It has the same height of 80 feet, but a slightly shorter track length at 2,037 feet. Unlike Primeval Whirl, the two sides on Matterhorn are different and unique. Granted, the ride experience feels somewhat similar, but they are not direct copies of each other. For whatever reason, the Tomorrowland side is seen as the more intense side, and while I do agree, I could not tell you exactly why. The shorter length plus the shorter duration lends me to believe the Tomorrowland side is a bit better paced and crazier. Unfortunately, I just do not have enough experience and insight into this. When I spent a day at Disneyland last year, I rode each side just once. I liked the Tomorrowland side more. When I went back a couple weeks ago, I rode the Fantasyland side once, but was not able to get on the Tomorrowland side. We actually tried and got as far as getting on the ride, but we ended up being evacuated at the base of the lift hill, and it closed for the rest of the night. So I'm just going to go with my gut and my general consensus that the Tomorrowland side is better, at least in the eyes of roller coaster enthusiasts like myself. It is a double-edged sword because the crazier experience is achieved by a bumpier and jerkier ride. So if you're someone who wants something a little more relaxing and something you don't have to ride defensively, then I might recommend the Fantasyland side. But I can handle it, so I give the edge to the Tomorrowland side. Next up is Space Mountain at Magic Kingdom, specifically the Alpha side. Space Mountain is pretty much the successor to the Matterhorn bobsleds, as the ride vehicles and the way the rides maneuver are similar. But Space Mountain was technically not built by Aerodynamics, although Aero was involved in some capacity while Disney designed and built a lot of it in-house. But at the end of the day, I essentially consider it an Aero, or at least like a copy of an Aero. However you draw it up, it opened in 1975 with a height of 90 feet, a speed of 27 miles per hour, and a length of 3,196 feet. Space Mountain is like a modern Matterhorn. Huge emphasis on modern, as nearly 50 years old is nowhere near the consideration of modern for a roller coaster. Maybe a better description would be an upgraded Matterhorn 2.0. While the maneuvers between Matterhorn and Space Mountain are similar, Space Mountain does it better. Tighter turns, better airtime, and less jerky. At least that's how it feels on the pitch black where you can't see anything. But it still isn't ultra smooth and there's still some jank to it. If you know me and or you've been watching the channel, you know that I'm kind of a Space Mountain hater, specifically for the Disney World installations. I don't want to be, I want to like Space Mountain more than I do, but I can just never get the rides that all my friends are always describing to me. I will say though, it grows on me just a little bit with each ride. And I will also say, after my ride on Matterhorn bobsleds a couple weeks ago, I went ahead and moved Space Mountain above Matterhorn bobsleds in my rankings. I have come to appreciate Space Mountain more for the crazier experience in the dark, coupled with the slightly better tracking compared to Matterhorn. I will continue riding Space Mountain in the hopes of better rides that are more representative of what everybody is seemingly raving about to me. Naturally, number 10 is Space Mountain, specifically the Omega side at Magic Kingdom. This also opened in 1975 with the same height of 90 feet, the same speed of 27 miles per hour, but 10 more feet of track at 3,196 feet. Just like Matterhorn, the two sides of Space Mountain are not clones, but the two sides of Space Mountain are more similar to each other than the two sides of Matterhorn are similar to each other, if that makes sense. People say the Omega side either has bigger drops or an extra drop or two. I honestly do not know what it is, and honestly, unlike the Matterhorn bobsleds, I have not found much of a difference between the two sides of Space Mountain. I'm just going with the general consensus of roller coaster enthusiasts with myself, and I rank both sides right next to each other in my overall rankings, unlike Matterhorn. Coming in number 9 is Seven Dwarfs Mine Train at Magic Kingdom. Built by Vekoma and opening in 2014, Seven Dwarfs is a family coaster with unique cars that can rock side to side. It has a drop of 41 feet, another drop of 31 feet, a top speed of 34 miles per hour, and a track length of 2001.3 feet. Coaster enthusiasts tend to bash on this ride, but I think it has some redeeming qualities. The landscaping of this coaster is absolutely beautiful in a natural way. Yes, there's a rock mountain, but it feels natural and there are plenty of trees and shrubs and water and whatnot. I also like the dark ride scene in the middle, and I do think this coaster has some force at some points. I've gotten some faint weightlessness on the two big drops, and there are some turns that have a little zip. And the speed you have leaving the station into the tunnel is always fun. Most importantly to me is the swaying or the rocking of each car. Now, yes, they don't really sway that much, and it does not impact the coaster that much during the coaster sections. I completely agree, but I like it for a different reason. Something that all my friends have taught me and done for all my rides since I got my Disney World season pass was rocking the car in the dead spots of the ride. So I'm talking about the lift hills, the dark ride section in the middle, and most importantly, the brake run. I have honestly had a ton of fun doing this for each of my rides. It almost feels like a game. Like, how much can we make it sway? Will the strangers in our car get on board with the leaning back and forth? It is most fun doing it when you advance into the unload station because you eventually hit a stabilizer and it could be pretty violent if you have your car swinging big time. This part of the ride has just been so much fun for me. I know it's not a conventional way to look at a roller coaster, but for me, it's enough to bump it up higher than it realistically should be or where everyone else has it ranked. Up next is Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, specifically the one at Magic Kingdom for this entry. This is another roller coaster that was technically built by Disney themselves, but it is essentially an aerodynamic slash Vekoma mine train coaster. The Magic Kingdom version opened in 1980 with a top speed of 36 miles per hour and 2,780 feet of track. This coaster is just plain fun. Not forceless, but not overwhelming. More rides than not, I don't really get good airtime, but there are some occasional rides where I get some pretty good air. The laterals are fairly strong on Big Thunder, especially for a family roller coaster. Of every roller coaster I have covered so far, Big Thunder has the best restraints. It is 2 across seating, actually up to 3 if you have 2 kids, but only 1 lap bar for the entire row. And the operators never really care how far down the restraint is, so most of my rides, the restraint is not even touching me, which adds to the airtime and laterals. The laterals can be even crazier if you're in a row by yourself because there are no seat dividers. To really tie in the whole experience, Big Thunder Mountain has some fantastic theming. It really feels like you're navigating, well, a Big Thunder Mountain. Okay, maybe minus the thunder part. I don't really know how a mountain is thunder, but big mountain for sure. There are so many small and intricate details that you just keep finding new things to look at with each ride. It's also a super long ride consisting of 3 separate lift hills. Up to the point in this video, Big Thunder offers the most complete package for a Disney roller coaster. It is finally time for the last duplicate entry of the list. Number 7 is the other Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, this one at Disneyland Park. This is a mirrored clone of the Magic Kingdom's version, But for whatever reason, according to the roller coaster database, the Disneyland version is listed at 28 miles per hour, which is 8 miles per hour less than the Magic Kingdom version. That seems off to me, but I digress. The Disneyland version is also listed as being a little shorter in track length at 2,671 feet. Disneyland's version opened first in 1979. I don't really have that much to add for this entry. These rides are practically the same. I give the slight edge to Disneyland's version for three minor reasons. One, for whatever reason, I thought the laterals were stronger on this version compared to Magic Kingdom's version. Two, I thought there were some closer interactions with water on Disneyland's version throughout the layout that I enjoyed. And three, I enjoy the queue of Disneyland's version more. With number 6, we are moving on to the more thrilling roller coasters at Disney, starting with Incredicoaster at Disney's California Adventure. Formerly known as California Screamin', Incredicoaster opened in 2001 and was built by Intamin. Incredicoaster is actually one of the longest roller coasters in the world with 6,072 feet of track. The coaster hits a top speed of 55 miles per hour, features one inversion, that is a vertical loop, and the largest drop is 108 feet. This is a launched roller coaster featuring one LIM launch and then one LIM boost that essentially acts like a lift hill. When I was at the park a couple weeks ago, Incredicoaster was closed for refurbishment, so while I don't have the freshest experience on it, I have a handful of rides on it across 2014, 2021, and 2023. This coaster is like a jack of all trades, master of none. It's a bit of a weird fit at Disney, albeit it's a better fit than Goofy Sky School or Primeval Whirl. I think the biggest con with this ride is that it has a lot of dead space. Now, this is for two reasons that I could think of. One, it's one of the longest coasters in the world, so there's going to be a lot of opportunity for dead space. Two, this is still a Disney coaster, so they're never going to build a pure extreme coaster. The long drawn out turns on Incredicoaster are thrilling enough for the average guest, even though they're seen as a little wasteful in the eyes of roller coaster enthusiasts like myself. But Incredicoaster does have something redeeming that helps with the countless lifeless turns: the onboard audio. In terms of onboard audios out there, it's not too crazy as it was just recycled music from the movies with some dialogue thrown in there, but virtually any onboard audio is a massive win in my book. So even when you're making a long swooping turn for a solid 5 seconds, at least there's cool music. Alongside the onboard audio, this coaster does sneak in some solid forces in there. The launch has a bit of a kick, there are certainly some moments of weak weightlessness, and the vertical loop is a rare inversion across any Disney property. One thing Incredicoaster lacks in is the theming. Sure, it has the onboard audio, which does help, but it's not nearly as complete of an experience like Big Thunder or Seven Dwarfs. The queue and station are basically nothing burgers, and there's only so much you can do like theming a coaster as big and sprawling as Incredicoaster is. Like I said, Disney purposely did not go extreme on this coaster, but it has moments that satisfy roller coaster enthusiasts. Pair that with the onboard audio, and that makes it enough for me to rank it above the certified Disney classics I've already covered in this video. Moving into the top 5, we have Rock and Roller Coaster starring Aerosmith at Disney's Hollywood Studios. Built by Vekoma and opening in 1999, Rock and Roller Coaster is the most extreme roller coaster at any Disney park in the United States. This is another launch coaster, going from 0 to 57 miles per hour in 2.8 seconds. It reaches a height of 80 feet across its 3,267.7 feet of track. It also features 3 inversions: a sea serpent, which counts as 2 inversions, and a standard corkscrew. Unfortunately, this is another coaster I would not consider myself a master of. Since I bought my Disney World pass, I have only been able to ride it twice across all my visits, as I have gotten unlucky with the ride being closed both temporarily and for another refurbishment. And before I've been visiting for the past half year of my pass, the last time I rode Rock and Roller Coaster was 10 or more years ago. But I do feel more confident talking about Rock and Roller Coaster compared to the Tomorrowland side of Matterhorn bobsleds, for example. And I was also able to ride Express Platform 13 at Wallaby Holland in the Netherlands last summer, which is a clone of Rock and Roller Coaster minus being indoors and any on-ride theming. Rock and Roller Coaster has two knocks against it in my eyes. One, the reliability, at least for Disney standards. While I do not take reliability into consideration when ranking roller coasters, it is still very much important. Rock and Roller Coaster has to have the most downtime across all of the coasters on this list, both in terms of temporary closures and planned refurbishments. Two, this coaster is not a long ride. It's not a short ride, but it's average, which can seem a little on the shorter side if you compare it to other Disney rides sometimes. Rock and Roller Coaster has great theming for an extreme roller coaster. I have not waited in the main queue in way too long, over 10 years, so I can't speak on that. But the pre-show, while maybe not super exciting, it's still cool with the appearance of Aerosmith. The launch area is themed well, complete with a countdown from Steven Tyler. And then throughout the coaster, you're whizzing past and through like these neon highway signs or shop signs and the Hollywood sign, amongst other things. And then this is another roller coaster with lovely onboard audio. You get one of the following five options, all being Aerosmith songs. 1. 9 Lives. 2. Love is an Elevator and Walk This Way. 3. Young Lust, Fine, and Love in an Elevator. 4. Back in the Saddle and Dude Looks Like a Lady. And 5. Sweet Emotion. So, pretty much, if you like Aerosmith, or maybe more broadly, you like rock, like I consider I do, you're going to like the onboard audio. Like I mentioned, the ride itself is the most intense across all parks in the country. The launch is pretty good, the Sea Serpent is very intense, and the corkscrew is very fun. The remainder of the ride are turns that can be hit or miss, and I say miss lightly. Some of the turns are intense, but some of them can be a little lackluster, although not nearly as lackluster as the turns on Incredicoaster. These turns are accompanied with awesome music and some of those aforementioned signs for theming, so even though you might not be moving aggressively, you're still having fun. Rock and Roller Coaster is always a great time and deserving of a top 5 spot in this list. If only they could figure out the reliability. Hopefully they can with the current refurbishment that's ongoing as of making this video. Just missing the podium is Expedition Everest, Legend of the Forbidden Mountain at Disney's Animal Kingdom. Expedition Everest was built by Vekoma, and when it opened in 2006, it was the world's most expensive roller coaster. The coaster has a max height of 112 feet, a drop of 80 feet, a top speed of 50 miles per hour, and a track length of 3,884.5 feet. Although it's a minor detail, I want to cover my bases and clarify that due to the nature of the ride, not everyone reaches the same top height, and the actual track length you traverse is slightly more than what is listed. Expedition is the complete package. It's a long ride. It's got theming and tells a story. It has thrilling moments that I can appreciate as an enthusiast without being overbearing for the average Disney guest. There's a lot to like with Expedition Everest, and honestly, I can't think of anything that I dislike. Well, maybe except the fact that the Yeti animatronic doesn't work. And on second thought, although it doesn't bother me personally one bit, Expedition Everest does have a rattle, and I know people get fairly bothered by it. Again, it doesn't bother me. In fact, this is my most ridden roller coaster on this list, thanks in part to the single rider line, but I think it's a testament that the rattle doesn't bother me since I've been on this over and over again. But beyond that, I can't really think of anything where it's like, oh, instead of this, they should have done that. Or, you know what, they should have done this, or they could have done this instead. You don't really think about that with this ride. The only reason I could not put it any higher on the list is because I just find the top three more thrilling. The pre-lift is so relaxing. Not really thrilling at all, but it's still cool to glide through the beautiful landscaping. I like the structure you go through on the lift. The top of the mountain is always impressive, and making your way through the exterior of the mountain is always beautiful. Of course, one of the most infamous moments on any roller coaster ever is climbing the mountain only to encounter a dead end and then drop backwards. This is not intense at all, but it's always fun hearing others' reactions, and the area where you sit for a few seconds feels so authentic and immersive. But immediately following the backwards release is the indoor helix, and it's pretty darn intense. It will catch you off guard for a Disney ride. It surprises me pretty much every time I ride it. Then you have the room with the other dead end. It's always awesome that it's freezing in there, and the drop after this room is pretty good for Disney. Nothing crazy, compared to roller coasters in the country, but it might be the best pure drop at Disney World. The back gives some airtime, which is, a little rare at Disney. The rest of the ride, weaving in and out the mountain, is pretty well paced, and then of course you encounter the Yeti, and although it doesn't work, it's still pretty cool. Coming in third is a personal favorite of mine that might get some backlash compared to where I placed the other Space Mountain. But this one is Space Mountain at Disneyland. Opening in 1977, this was built by Disney themselves, but again, it's heavily influenced by aerodynamics. Only two stats for this one being the top speed of 32 miles per hour, and two, the track length of 3,459 feet. I'm not exactly sure where to begin with this one. All of the roller coaster enthusiasts are probably spamming the comments and disliking the video because most of them prefer Disney World's version, but I'm not afraid to take my stance and stand my ground. I'm willing to admit that Disneyland's version is not as crazy as Disney World's, but I find the Disneyland version to provide the much better overall experience. It is much more immersive for a couple reasons. One, the station is so much better than Disney World's. The center figure on the ceiling is impressive, alongside the screens that make it seem like you're zooming through space. Two, most importantly, and probably the biggest reason I give this coaster a big jump in my rankings, is the onboard audio. I think you already know my stance on onboard audio. I've talked about it in pretty great lengths across multiple videos on my channel, and on this video alone, I've already praised the onboard audio on Incredicoaster and Rock and Roller Coaster. But the thing about Space Mountain's onboard audio is that it very well might be the best onboard audio to ever exist. Fight me in the comments if you want, but the custom score made by Michael Giacchino, hope I said that right, it's my favorite ever. It is absolutely epic, and it makes the ride for me. I can't tell you how much I listen to the track on Spotify. And, when I'm listening to it, I'm sitting there wishing I was on Space Mountain at Disneyland. What is awesome about the onboard audio is that it is specifically made to accompany the ride. The way the music changes when you're on the lift and then the dome is revealed, it just sends shivers down your spine. I could go on and on about this audio, but the ride that accompanies the music is pretty solid too. It's butter smooth, unlike its counterpart in Florida, both in terms of eliminating the old janky transitions, and it tracks well. It just feels much more modern. Disneyland's version focuses a bit more on just turns, but a lot of these turns are still a blast. The trains on Disneyland's versions are far superior. It means a lot to be able to sit next to somebody. It's a more natural riding seating position. There's still one pretty solid drop, and it's a very long ride. There are not many roller coasters out there that are both below 35 miles per hour and approaching 3,500 feet of track. Combine this with the onboard audio, and you just have a massive winner in my books. Silver goes to Tron Light Cycle Run at Magic Kingdom. Opening just last year in 2023 and built by Vekoma, We only know two stats again. A top speed of 60 miles per hour and a track length of 3,169.3 feet. I can also tell you that this coaster has a launch. It goes 0 to 60 miles per hour in I don't know how many seconds. If you could not tell from this video, Disney doesn't really like releasing stats. Anyways, this coaster catches some heat from both roller coaster enthusiasts and the average day guest. Most of the criticism stems from the feeling that Tron is short. And I completely understand. For a Disney coaster, I would agree it is on the shorter end. And for all the hype Tron gets for being the newest coaster at any Disney park, you gotta get that virtual queue to ride and all that. This disappoints a lot of people. But the way I look at it, throwing the Disney filter aside, Tron is average length for a roller coaster. I mean, for me personally, my home park has not built a coaster that lasts over 45 seconds since 2012. So when I rode Tron, I thought the length was just right and the length never bothered me. So with that said, I have kind of proclaimed myself as the biggest fan of Tron out there. If you know me personally or you watch some of my videos, you might be surprised I don't have Tron ranked number one based on how much I praise Tron when I talk about it. I'm sure you know what my number one is by now. It's pretty much everybody's number one. But I think Tron gives the number one coaster a pretty good run for its money. The Tron experience is unique in that it really begins before you even get in queue. Tron is one of the most visually pleasing coasters in the world with its canopy, especially at night. Walking up to the plaza for this coaster at night is just nothing you can experience anywhere else. Seeing each train fly above you with all the hexagons and the color changing lights, I cannot accurately describe in words how awesome seeing this coaster at night is. Besides being in the same area, the exterior queue is a bit lackluster, but once you get inside, it's dope. The pre-show, if you want to call it that, is short but awesome. And then the rest of the queue and the entire coaster for that matter does a great job feeling like you're in the world of Tron. Even if you're not familiar with Tron, like I was for the first few visits with my pass, since I hadn't seen the movie yet, you still feel like you're in the real future. And not the outdated future like the rest of Tomorrowland and Test Track. Speaking of the interior and the coaster, it's time to talk about it again. The soundtrack. Tron's soundtrack, it's not custom like Space Mountain as they just reused the movie album soundtrack made by Daft Punk. But it's no secret that that album is highly regarded as one of the best movie soundtracks of all time. And let me tell you, it translates super well to the outdoor canopy section, the indoor queue, the station, and of course, if you didn't see it coming, the onboard audio. Although technically the onboard audio is custom, but not exactly because it's more of like a remix of songs that already existed from the movie album. But I'm not complaining. It freaking rocks. Daft Punk on a coaster? Say less. Especially from dispatch to launch, the onboard audio does a killer job setting the mood and building that suspense. The onboard audio is pretty good throughout the rest of the ride as well. Like I indirectly mentioned, the room where you launch does a great job of putting you in the movie. It's both cool and intimidating in a way. The actual launch legitimately is good. It has more punch than you would think a Disney coaster would have, just like Rock and Roller Coaster. And honestly, it probably has a better punch than Top Thrill 2's first launch. Too soon? That was kind of uncalled for, sorry. Top Thrill 2's catching strays when it literally just opened. Anyways, the outdoor portion of this coaster is short, but impactful. Again, at night, it's almost life-changing, at least for experiencing the ride. Then you move into the indoor section. This is another aspect of the ride that catches some flack, more so from coaster enthusiasts. I haven't really heard the general guess complain about what happens during the indoor section, but it's essentially a lot of turns with a couple mid-course brake runs. But I like the indoor section for three reasons, although some of them overlap. One, I like the turns. I think they're fun. Two, I think the theming is cool. Now, yes, the theming isn't fantastic in there, but I still think there's enough for you to look at as you make your way through the box. Three, something that impacts the entire ride that I have not mentioned yet, is the seating position. This is yet another divisive aspect of the ride for both enthusiasts and general guests. You are essentially sitting like you would for a motorcycle race where you are leaning in with a lot of your weight on your stomach. I understand it's not the most comfortable position. I think people don't really understand that maybe the ride is the perfect length because you just can't handle this seating position for that long. I know when I get stuck on the brake run, I start feeling it. I know the seating position prohibits a fair amount of people from riding as it's not that accommodating. For me, I see it both ways. It does not feel natural to me and it bothers me a little, more so with my calves. But at the same time, I really think it enhances the entire ride. It really sells the idea that you're riding a light cycle, like you're racing against the orange team. I have a lot of fun in the arrangement, even if it's not practical. So pair that with a good launch, great theming, great music both off-ride and on-ride, and this is another one of my personal favorites. Unless you're shocked that I didn't put Tron at number one because you personally know how much I rave about Tron, you probably knew what number one was before you clicked the video. It is, of course, Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind at Epcot. Built by Vekoma, Guardians opened in 2022. In typical Disney fashion, they haven't released an official number. I can't totally confirm this, but the general consensus is that Guardians is the most expensive roller coaster to ever be built right now, with a price tag estimated around $500 million. And it's not hard to see why. It is 5,577.4 for good measure feet long, making it the world's longest indoor slash enclosed roller coaster. It might be the world's biggest box. Obviously not really, but you really can't appreciate the size and scale of this coaster until you pull into Epcot's parking lot and you just see this gargantuan box. On top of being built inside a building, the ride model is the first of its kind. Each train has a controlled spin that enhances the coaster without getting too crazy like the freely spinning coasters in the world. It's a very tame and slow spin. I wouldn't really worry too much about it if you heard that it spins and maybe you felt a little intimidated by that. It's not really that overwhelming. The ride features a 0 to 60 mile per hour launch completely backwards, and then has a boost launch in the middle of the ride. And then, of course, Guardians has onboard audio. One of six songs is randomly played for your ride. September by Earth, Wind, and Fire, Disco Inferno by The Tramps, Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears, One Way or Another by Blondie, I Ran So Far Away by A Flock of Seagulls, and Conga by Miami Sound Machine. I guess I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's backtrack for a second. The ride has two pre-shows and a pretty impressive station. The first pre-show isn't anything groundbreaking, but it does have Terry Crews and his memes that you might have seen on TikTok or YouTube or whatever, so that's cool. The second pre-show, though, is much cooler. You get loaded into like a smallish room. The lights go out for literally 2 seconds, and then bam, the lights go back on, and you see that the walls are gone, and now you're in a much bigger and cooler room where the rest of the pre-show continues. In typical Guardians of the Galaxy fashion, it's got some humor in it despite the world seemingly ending, and then the station is impressive between its dual loading and the scale of the room. Okay, so back to the on-ride experience. So this launch doesn't have the best punch, but you definitely feel the speed of it by the end. Of course, going backwards only adds to the experience. Honestly though, from this point on, I would have a hard time breaking down what Guardians does. It's hard with the spinning, and I would not say the coaster has any standout elements per se. The standout element is that it's just plain fun. Turns, airtime pops, onboard audio. There's also narration from the Guardians. Perhaps the biggest thing is that the cars often turn in a way that give you a better view of these massive screens where the story is being shown. Guardians does have a cohesive story, but it's almost hard to understand it because you're just laughing your butt off the entire ride. These screens are impressive though. Guardians is just a blast. It's one of those coasters that doesn't need to be 200 feet tall or go upside down 7 times or, be like 70 miles per hour to be fun. Without question, it is the best roller coaster on any Disney property in the States and probably in the entire world too. Not Disney World, like the actual world, you know, Earth. And with that, that's all I've got for this video. Do you agree with my takes? Are you mad about the disparity I put between both Space Mountains? Or how much I defended Tron? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, or maybe even tell me your rankings. I'd love to hear it. Thanks for checking out the video, and I hope to see you all again. Push down, pull up, exit to the right. Hope you enjoyed the video, and go have your greatest day yet. Choo choo, bye!